We have our special guest, Roy Wilbur, actor, singer, and just an all-around good guy. We're honored to have you. I have a few questions to ask you off the bat. Where did you grow up?
Well, I'm a Midwestern boy. I grew up in Wichita, Kansas. Didn't really get into singing. I mean, I sang as a voice soprano.
Really? Wow,
Yeah.
okay.
And I actually did some performances, some solo performances as a voice soprano in my church and other places. My family is not a musical family. I mean, my folks sang in church. My mom had a lovely soprano voice, but I wasn't exposed to any kind of music beyond church music until I got into high school.
Okay.
In my senior year in high school, we were doing scenes from Gilbert and Sullivan. I remember doing, at that time I was singing baritone. I remember doing Figaro. We did a scene from Marriage of Figaro.
Wow.
I eventually attended Wichita State. But they had a wonderful opera department. Hooked up with a voice teacher, Vernon Yenny, at Wichita State University, even when I was a senior. After I graduated from high school, well, I got a scholarship to attend Wichita State University.
Great.
But my first year out of high school, I had the wonderful opportunity to attend a place in outside Eureka Springs, Arkansas, called the Inspiration Point Fine Arts Colony. I was 17 at the time.
Oh.
And there was a group of women, a musical club in Wichita that paid for me to go, provided a scholarship. Wow. I did some small roles. I was only, I was 17. I'll never forget though. We were doing, I think it was a rehearsal of that. And there's an old guy named Isaac Van Grove who was in charge of the opera program. And I learned so much from him because he was tough. Boy, really? Was he tough. And he brought me to tears on stage. And I realized at that point, boy, that toughened me up. And I learned so much from that, even a very early age, about how to work with tough people in the business. He was like in his 80s. This guy, evidently he had quite a career. First year in college, I went back and I did it again. And it was such a growing experience being at the Inspiration Point Fine Arts College. It actually has another name now. It still exists.
Really? Wow. Okay.
Louis Menendez, who you may know.
Yes, absolutely.
With Wichita State University, got a great education there, working with Dr. George Gibson, working with Vernon Yenny. I did Dr. Tutto and Dr. Miracle in Tales of Hoffman. But I was a high baritone, so I did I did Eisenstein in Die Fledermaus. So because I always I could throw off those G's, and even in my recital, my senior recital, I did the prologue from Pagliacci. So I was able to, at that young age, I was able to do have the high notes as a baritone. In the summertime, I was working with an organization which still exists called the Music Theater Wichita as a resident artist there. Did that for 5 years, 5 summers. But when I was at Wichita State, I worked at a place where they had singing waiters and waitresses. I was just surrounded with so many opportunities in Wichita. I was a big fish in a little pond there. An amazing experience. And we had master classes. People would come and do master classes. And there was a baritone by the name of Ryan Edwards, who you might be familiar with. He sang at the Met. Sang in a lot of major roles at the Met. And he did a master class. He just looked at me, he said, he told me he had nothing to say, which I seriously believe that, don't believe that. But he highly recommended that I come and audition for the Academy of Vocal Arts in Philadelphia. Wow. He was an alum. He was an alumnus of AVA. So I came out to AVA. I auditioned. I got in. And within my first year, I was my voice teacher with Nell Rankin, the wonderful mezzo soprano.
Yes, absolutely, yes.
Years and years. So she was my teacher, and I remember one day they were kind of pushing me to go tenor because I had that kind of ring to my voice. And so she and other people thought it would be a good idea for me to test the waters being a tenor. Well, at that time, everybody wanted to be a tenor. Yeah, I mean, I was still singing. I remember I sang the male chorus in Rape of Lucretia. But a lot of the stuff that Dino Yiannopoulos had me doing were smaller roles, like I did Monasta Toast and Flute,
Right.
and a lot of smaller roles. My biggest role really when I was at AVA was the male chorus. I understudied Bacchus and Ariadne, so I was a heavy, tenor, singing big repertoire. But I would say it really wasn't until my final year that I really felt comfortable. At AVA, one of my church jobs, we actually did the Rossini Stabat Mater. And I was actually able to, sing that high D flat. I did have the top, but the tessitura continued to be, a challenge for me. And then I got out, and like you were saying before we started this conversation, I was like, okay, now what do I do?
Right.
What do I do now? I left AVA because, schools don't prepare you for the business side. Another opportunity I had when I was working at AVA, I worked with an organization called the Philadelphia Drama Guild. Their company did performances at the Annenberg Center at Penn. And I started out in telemarketing. And so while I was there, even after I left AVA, I learned for 9 years when I wasn't at AVA singing roles or busy there, or when I wasn't out in the field singing over the next 4 years or 5 years after I left AVA, I always had a job at the Philadelphia Drama Guild.
Wow.
So I learned all areas on the job, arts marketing and arts administration, even doing contracts for actors and working with the board. So I had the opportunity, I had a wonderful mentor, Gregory Poggi, there, who just gave me so many great opportunities that while I was singing, I learned I was also working part-time at the drama.
Out of the mouths of babes. My son, who is now 32, came to see you do The Witch in Hansel and Gretel. And this is the God's honest truth. Was enamored when you would run through, and it was everything that you did was just, he could not take his eyes off of you, period. He met you, I introduced this is Rich and this is Roy, and for years when Christmas would come around, he would say, I want to see Roy, because he had talked with Elizabeth at the time. And that's the impression that you made on such a young person. I mean, because you were, and when you met, you were still in costume, which was tremendous. You just made a fantastic impression.
So The Witch was actually, I went back, I was associate I was the associate director at AVA for about 5 years. I was there, we did the production of Hansel and Gretel. And it was then that they cast me as the witch. And one of my Hansels was the wonderful Joyce DiDonato, which, who's gone on to, but I like to brag about her because she was just so fantastic and amazing career she's having.
Yes.
But I wanted to say that in addition to singing the witch for 3 years of doing the opera, I directed it for 2 of the years. So we had 50 kids in the chorus. And the last time I did it, directing 50 kids takes a real toll on the voice. So the night we were getting ready, we had done our last rehearsal the 23rd of December, and we were going to open on the day after Christmas.
Okay. With
Hansel and Gretel. And I lost my voice.
Oh boy.
Lost it completely. I was freaking out. On Christmas Day, I had no voice, none. And we were going to do the performance the next day. Thank God for Peggy Baruti, because Peggy Baruti got me in to see a doctor. He took care of it. I was able to get through the performance, but that was, those times happen in this business too.
That's true.
And it's something you have to be prepared for. Unfortunately, I was single cast, so I had no choice but to go on.
Sure.
So that does happen in the business on occasion. The moment, I just want to say, it's not a moment that I was singing, but the prayer in Hansel and Gretel, and then the ballet that follows. is some of the most gorgeous music, in my
Yes.
opinion, of all of opera.
Yes.
And it gives me goosebumps thinking about it.
Mm.
And I would stand backstage and I would watch Hansel and Gretel sing the wonderful prayer, and then followed by the music with the ballet and everything. And I would never miss it. I would make sure that I was ready in my witch costume, so I'm ready to go, so I could stand in the wings and watch that moment on stage, because that was another real highlight for me in all of the performing opportunities that I had. The witch doesn't come on until the second act.
Right.
But that was just a beautiful and wonderful experience.
I want to see if I'm correct. You did Rodolfo, did you not?
I did do Rodolfo.
Where was that?
It was in Charlotte, North Carolina, with a small company there. Carrie Kugler, who worked at the Academy of Vocal Arts, was an assistant director, stage director there.
Right.
He cast me in that, along with Todd Mundy, who, the late Todd Mundy, who was also maybe a person, a baritone.
Yes, remember.
He did Marcello. I did Ranuccio in.
Where was that? Where that? It maybe it was
at Chautauqua. And I know you were at Chautauqua too.
Yes.
I felt very good about the role of Ranuccio. Of course, it's a much smaller role. After I got out, I did the photos. Started putting press packs together of what press clippings I had. And I just auditioned. Out of that, I was able to go to Chautauqua for a couple of years. I did a couple of summers. I did Michigan Opera Theater.
Right.
And the way that I got most of my work was from people who had seen my work. So I was one of the greatest opportunities I ever had was to do Lenny in Carlisle Floyd's Of Mice and Men.
Yes, wonderful
and
role.
I have to say that was vocally probably the most rewarding experience I've ever had. And acting wise, I felt very good about it. But because we were able to spend a period of about 2.5 months just putting it. Director was Robert Darling. We did it with the Hidden Valley Opera, which is outside Carmel. This is back in 1985.
Wow.
And it was such a great experience. I had got a great review. LA Times came and reviewed it. I got a great review out of that. But word of mouth got to Florida Grand Opera, who was getting ready to do Of Mice and Men with Carlisle Floyd.
Wow.
They had an opening. The one of the cast members, they do 2 casts. And one of the guys who was going to do Lenny ended up not being able to do it. So I went down and auditioned. And interestingly enough, I was on my way with some other singers on my way to do Rose Martinelli, who you probably remember. Todd Thomas.
Thomas, right.
Judy Lovett.
Oh, wow. Jeez.
All singers, I'm sure you know.
Yes.
We were all on our way to do a cruise. So it just so happened that I was able to stop in Florida on the way down to get on this boat and audition. And I sang one of his arias, and I sang Recondita Armonia, which was kind of the aria that I always, that and the Flower Song were like my audition, my 2 really good audition pieces that I auditioned with as a tenor. And they cast me with him directing.
Wow.
And he always said, oh, you're too good looking for Lenny. And I put a wig on you. And I said, please don't put a wig on me. I use my hair so much because when I acting Lenny, I use my hair a lot. And I said, if you put a wig on me, it's just not. So he went with it, which I was grateful for. So what a great opportunity to be able to do Of Mice and Men with the composer. Doing the role of Lenny with the Mice and Men, the other people who were in the cast with me, these were city opera singers. These were singers that were singing at the city opera. These were singers that were singing with all over the country. But in order to make things ends meet, they still had to do jobs, waiting tables or whatever. And I was just like, is that what I want?
Yeah.
At that time, I had an opportunity. The director of marketing position came from McGill. And so I decided to take the position and to continue singing and doing what I could on the side in the Philadelphia area, which I did.
Yes.
Which I did. But I didn't feel with the issues I was having with reflux and just some other personal issues that I was going to have the career that I wanted to have. Around the time that I transitioned from the singing career into full-time arts administration, I was 30 years old.
That's young.
And I was turning 30. That was the toughest birthday, you know,
Sure.
40, 50, 60 pieces of cake for me compared to what I went through when I was 30. 8th grade when I started singing, all the way to the age of 30, you know, that was my life, was singing. And so, and the work that I did at Wichita State, 5 years there, 4 years at ABA, the apprenticeships, everything, you know, it's in preparing for the career. And then to have to make that very, very, very difficult decision.
Yes.
To transition out of pursuing, I should say pursuing a full-time, was extremely, extremely difficult.
You also had a nice sized career as just a straight actor.
Actually, that was while I was working, doing roles like I was the tallest. Well, also back when I was singing, when I was at ABA, I remember I was doing stuff with the Wilbur and Sullivan Company in Philadelphia. I was the tallest Nanky Poo in the history of the Mikado, for sure. So I did some Gilbert stuff. But anyway, and then I went on and I was probably the tallest Felix in Neil Simon's Odd Couple. I did Hector in The History Boy, Poconos, where I live now, recently in a production of Death of a Salesman. Yeah, so I'm doing some theater now, and I've taken up guitar, and I've been playing for about 2.5 years, doing the Frank Sinatra stuff, some 80s and 90s, and so that I can sing in some senior homes up here. And I'm going to have my first guitar gig on May 19th, which I'm practicing furiously. A place, senior living place.
What performance had you so exhilarated that magic worked and you walked off the stage and you were 4 foot high?
That's easy. I was floating. That still today, it was the first time I did Lenny in Mice and Men with Hidden Valley Opera. Digging into that, the way that we did with Robert Darling, digging into the text and digging into the music, and really developing the characters and developing the relationships and how the words worked with the music, and what was it the composer was trying to get us able to get off stage, and at the end, and hoping that no one switched the guns. Oh God, I made it through the performance with no one switched the guns. So he gets shot at the end.
Yes, I know. Yes.
Books and my photos and stuff, and I came across a picture from that, and looking at it, I was just so moved by it. Even today, just in the last year, I posted that on Facebook because it's one of the fondest performing memories I have of anything I've ever done.
Best recommendation for somebody to be prepared as a professional singer. What advice would you give them?
One, get into apprentice programs. That there are a number of them around the country. All the way from Sarasota to Lake George to Chautauqua to San Francisco. They're all over the place. Yeah. Get into these apprentice programs where you can network, because it's through that networking that you're able to then, it opens up all kinds of other opportunities for you. That being said, you have to get into the programs to begin with. So number one, get good headshots that show a couple of different looks for you. What are the kind of characters that you feel you are most suited to? Are you vocally as well as personality wise? And when you're thinking about creating your photos, do like maybe 3 different looks that capture you as an actor, as a singer in those roles. And these days, they're going to go on your Facebook page.
Exactly. Roy, you know, I admire you as a performer, a singer, and especially a human being. I think that you are a lovely man. You know, we've known each other through our paths for many, many years. I am a huge fan of you, of Roy Wilbur.
Thank you so much, Don. My pleasure. I
Anytime.
enjoyed doing it.
Thank you, Roy.
Take
And
care.
we'll talk soon. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Today, our guest is Sandor Schneller, fine baritone and dear friend. Sandy, welcome.
Thank you very much, Maestro.
It's a pleasure to have you, and I thank you for all you do for Masterclass and the singing arts. It's greatly appreciated. I was so happy when you said yes that you were going to come aboard because of your vast knowledge of opera. I have a few questions for you, if you don't mind.
City Avenue, but basically Philadelphia. Philadelphia is across the street.
Really? Were your parents musical at all?
No. The only thing I remember from childhood was 8-track tapes in the car, and it was always some kind of Broadway show that was popular at the time. Really? That I would constantly be hearing in the car, because you're kind of a captive audience, even though you might not want to hear it at the time.
How old were you when you first started formally training?
I was about 19 or 20. This is a strange thing. There was a comedian at the time, and his name was Andy Kaufman. And you might remember him. He was one of the characters on the series Taxi.
Yes.
In one of his skits that he would do when he was on stage, he'd put on a LP album, which means long play for the people that don't remember what that is, 33 1/3 RPM. And he would do it to a recording of the Mighty Mouse show, Believe or All Things. And he'd kind of lip sync along to it and would go, "Here I come to save the day," like that. Mimicked it. And it was actually very easy to mimic that, and some people said, wow, did you sing opera? I mean, you could be an opera singer and stuff. And I'm like, opera? I don't know anything about that at all. You know, I've heard the word, but I don't really know anything about that at all. But it gave me an idea. And after I was finished with high school, I didn't have any real direction or anything, but it put an idea in my head. Perhaps, you know, that is something that I could do. And I met someone in the business that was a teacher and as well as a singer. And I had a couple lessons, and I got prepared for an audition, and I auditioned at what is now called University of the Arts in Philadelphia. At the time when I auditioned, it was called Philadelphia College of Performing Arts. And then it merged during my tenure there. And I thought that I did not do very well, to tell you the truth. But immediately they did that, and they sent me a very nice offer in the mail with a nice scholarship. And I said, yes, absolutely. It was a path to get into school.
Sure. Did you go, was it University of Connecticut before Philadelphia College of Performing Arts, or was that after?
No, that was after. I attended I met the head of the department at the time from the Chautauqua Institution, and I had a lesson with her in New York City. And she said, you know, we have this thing and we have some openings. Would you like to go? And I had no idea what anything was. As a matter of fact, I had never even set foot on any kind of a stage before that. When I auditioned at PCPA, it was just, you know, we just went into a room with a piano and a few people were seated there. And that was it. So I went there. Then I met the head of the department from the being built up at the time from University of Connecticut. And she made me an offer I couldn't refuse, like the Don would say. And so off to Connecticut I went.
Really? Wow. Who did you study with it? Let's go back to PCPA. Who did you study with at PCPA?
My first teacher was a very, very good man. And his name was Alan Wagner, and he's no longer with us.
No. Yes,
he passed rather recently. Afterwards, with Vivian Wagner, no relation between the two,
right.
The same name. Yeah.
What was the draw to opera after you started to get into it? You know, what did you find about the music that was so thrilling?
It was, I think that it was the mechanics of how the voice worked, and not so much from a pedagogical standpoint, because at the time I didn't even know what pedagogy was. It was more so, how does somebody get up on a stage with only their voice, with no microphones, and yet sing over an opera, and you see the passion and the feeling and the emotion that, and just what it stirs inside of you when you would see that. It was really very, very interesting. Until then, I had never studied any of the Romance languages, the Italian or German or French, or even any Latin at the time, any Spanish. And everything was very, very brand new to me at the time.
Say, what were some of your favorite roles? If I asked you, what are your favorite roles?
The very first scene that I did anyway from an opera was from Don Pasquale. And I played Don Pasquale in that, even though the lowest note is a low F, which I'm not sure that I actually have anymore to be worthy of anyone hearing it anyway. And that was the very first role. And at first it was very difficult because buffa, which means buffoonish, it's basically you're doing funny things on stage.
Right.
So the audience can kind of laugh, but go along with the feeling of the character. Difficult at first to learn, but after you kind of get used to that and settle in, it's something that I actually enjoy now doing, even though maybe it's not, considered top of the line in whatever ways.
I always say that, singing is singing. It doesn't matter what role you are. I always say there's never a small role, only a small paycheck. So, you sang the scenes in Don Pasquale, and then which I still hear you as a romantic baritone. But going on, what other roles have you worked on and what have you sung?
Gosh almighty, there's been a number of different things in different genres, some more dramatic, and certainly I'm not a bass, obviously,
no,
or even a bass baritone. Right. At the time, one of the things I did learn in school, even though I was never taught it directly, is that sometimes when a male has a lower voice, you're sometimes used in roles, not always, but sometimes used in roles that are not really in your best interest, but sometimes in the school's best interest. Because the same way that it was when I was singing when you were the director of the church choir at St. Peter's in Merchantville, the more entertained the audience feels, the greater the donor's pocketbook became to the school. And so they wanted to make sure that, that when they put on a performance, that that they would get grants or whatever that they would get from that.
Donations, yes.
Yeah.
The male voice are very, at that time, I'm sure was very scarce. Good ones anyway.
The low, definitely people that were being trained as baritones, but that you could clearly hear to the ear were not really baritones at all. They were actually tenors that didn't have an upper range yet at the time.
One of the things that I notice in masterclass from the younger singers that come in is that they don't have a very big historic knowledge of singers pre-2000 or even you want to say 1990. Who were some of your favorite go-to singers that you would listen to when you would listen to a role and you wanted to hear somebody? Who would you listen to?
Depending what role it was, I would listen to names such as, and I don't want to sound like name dropping, but this is what I actually heard. And at the time, we didn't have the advantages of being able to go online and pull up a name and hear all these recordings. That's so easy to do now. You would have to go to maybe the Free Library of Philadelphia on Vine Street and dig through things for hours and hours to hear a recording that in some cases was not very clear because the LP album had perhaps not been taken the best of care of over time. So as far as baritones go,
sure.
The first baritone that was recommended to me by the very first teacher that I had was a name I had never heard, having, at the time knowing nothing about opera. And that name was Leonard Warren. And when I heard recording of that, it was something that you never forget. I couldn't believe it. You know what I mean? It like almost brought me to tears. I couldn't believe it that
the baritone's baritone
was capable of that. Then also as far as baritones, George London, Robert Merrill, of course, who after Leonard Warren's death in some ways took over for him at the Met, even though from what I've read, Robert Merrill in the beginning, it was, I don't know, something happened and it was kind of iffy whether he'd be at the Met or not, but they gave him the chance. And of course, he was there for many, many years, decades.
Yes, absolutely. How about some other singers other than baritones? Who would you listen to?
As far as tenors would go, I would listen to Richard Tucker. I would listen to Beniamino Gigli, who just listening to him is in so many ways like a voice lesson in and of itself, as far as the line of legato goes, that I find is a big issue today with American singers. Richard Tucker's cousin Jan Pierce who was in some ways also a rival of,
Yes.
they're kind of a rival of each other. And there are just so many, there's too many actually to name. What I found is that if you say some of these names to the people studying today, the younger people, they like look at you like, who? If they're just not taught that because they're not, because the teachers perhaps can't teach them to sing like that anymore. And they want to head off a problem before it starts. And they don't want the student to come and say, you know, I heard this recording of so-and-so and they did it like this. And that's how I want to sound.
That the teacher should be responsible for introducing them to that, or would you lay it at the feet of the singer themselves, just to grasp knowledge?
I'd say maybe both. And it might not be that the teacher is withholding things from them. They themselves don't know themselves. And that's very possible also.
And that would be a crime, actually, in my opinion.
It would be a sin. I believe that it was you that taught me after I met you at PCPA. And I will tell the story there, if I may, briefly.
Sure, please.
But we were working on a production that was going to be held in what was called the Schubert Theater of Philadelphia. Mm-hmm. It became the Merriam Theater. I'm not sure if it's called Merriam any longer or not. Before the rehearsal took place, and you were on the stage, I didn't know you, I'd never seen you before, and you were instructing someone that was actually, I believe, a piano major with a minor in voice there. Mm-hmm. At the time, and you sang an interval just on an ah vowel, and you reached from like a C or a D to an A flat, and it was like blinking your eyes. It was nothing. And I remember that I was just peeking my head in the door because I didn't want to intrude on anyone. And I think my eyes almost popped out of my head. I couldn't believe it.
Well, thank you.
I went, and even though I didn't want to step on any toes, I don't think that I did. I went and I introduced myself to you, mm-hmm. and I asked if you had the time, if perhaps you could give me some instruction or some lesson at some point. And you said yes. And we set
Aren't you sorry for that now?
No, John, it was the best thing I ever did.
Oh.
We set up a time, and we went up the elevator.
Oh boy.
And we found a room. We found a room there, and it was like a corner room of the building, because the building above the Schubert Theater was actually where PCPA was conducting their music classes. And we found an empty room. And it was a corner room, and I remember there was a window on one side and a window on the other side. And because this is not an X-rated program, I can't repeat one of the very first things that you said to me. That was a mere 35 years or more ago. I'll give the audience at home an idea. You stood up, you were sitting at the piano, and you felt that I wasn't inhaling correctly. I wasn't breathing correctly, which I wasn't. And you took your belt off of your trousers and you put it around me, but above my waistline, so that I could feel the resistance as I would inhale, the resistance in front, but also around. And you said, geez, I hope nobody's looking through the window at us. And my first thought was, God, am I that terrible? You don't like even want to be seen with me? Or what? Then you said, because if my pants fall down, people will think you're blanking me. This was a guy I didn't even know. I didn't even know you're from Adam. I didn't even know your name. Oh my goodness.
Yes.
Oh boy.
And even back then, I was never even politically correct at all.
That was a long list of tricks and practical jokes you played on me
Oh my goodness.
over the years.
Did have a lot of fun. That's for damn sure.
Oh boy, did we.
Um, one thing I'd like to ask you, as a singer and a person who's actually sung professionally, what was the most difficult part of your tenure as a singer? Was it getting your voice to go? Was it the languages? Was it the music? Was it a combination of both? Was it the acting that you really had to work on? What did you have the most trouble overcoming in your younger years as a singer, as a younger singer?
To that, I'd say it probably was technical issues. I was just happened to have been born with a resonant voice. That was something I've never had to work on. It's always been resonant. As a matter of fact, I basically sounded the same as I sound now, speaking voice, when I was 16. I sound like anybody else on the street. I don't sound any different. Right. But it was that, because people would think, teachers would think, I must be doing it right. Look how resonant the sound is. Right. But I knew it was wrong by how it felt. I'd been told things like, no, those are golden tones, boy. You don't want to mess with that. And became so tight from, you have to breathe this way. You have to pull your larynx down. And it was just so tight that it was very difficult to let my voice out, because I was trying to be conscientious of everything that I was being told. And as a result, my technique suffered from that. The one thing that I will say that I never did was I would hear students go into practice rooms after school was over, and they would start practicing, and they do scales and runs or intervals, and they were doing it incorrectly, and anybody could hear that it was being done incorrectly, and they would do it again and again and again. And I always said to myself when I would hear that, why are they getting into a habit of doing something wrong? Isn't that going to be harder and detrimental in the long run to now have to break a bad habit rather than learn how to do it correctly and then reinforce that as time goes on?
Knowing what you know now, okay,
yes,
and going back to your roots as a young singer and having these feelings, you have challenged your teacher at now knowing what you know now and said, this does not feel right. Have you ever said that to somebody?
Yes, I actually have said that to somebody, and I'm not going to mention any names because that would be indiscreet. I was kind of told off about it, basically.
Really?
That I don't know what I'm talking about, but I knew that what I was feeling was not correct. And I'll tell any singer out there that is just learning now, if you get out of lessons and you are so hoarse that you literally cannot speak for the rest of the day, you can't speak till the following day, something is not right. And that is not learning, that is hurting yourself. And all that you have is right here. You have about 19 millimeters of vocal cords, because that's the whole length. 10 millimeters equals a centimeter, which is a little bit over half an inch. So we're talking about, in total length, the human vocal cords are only about an inch long. And you have 22 or so muscles surrounding those vocal cords. And if you do something to damage any one of those or get into a bad groove, a bad habit, then sometimes it's something you never get out of.
Scary as it is the absolute truth, because not all great singers are great teachers, and not all great teachers are great singers.
Exactly. So, that's exactly right.
And I'll say this to somebody: you can have a great teacher, and it for you, but for somebody else, it might just not work.
It might not be, and it doesn't always mean in certain situations that what you're being taught is wrong or bad. It could mean that either you're not ready to receive that information because of youth and or whatever, but it also means that it's just not working for you, and therefore I feel it's incumbent on anyone that wants to teach to be able to articulate what they are looking for in words in a way that you can understand it, that each student can, because everyone's different and everyone understands things in a slightly different way. And I don't think there's a cookie cutter approach or there should not be, to teaching, but unfortunately, sometimes it seems like a production line, and that students don't always get what they need. And I remember an interview with Jan Pierce many times ago, the great tenor, many years ago, rather. And he said on it that he had changed teachers many, many times, and that as you study singing, you have to change as many times as you have to get what you need. And that doesn't mean go in and you don't give somebody a chance. But after a while, if you give them a chance, 6-month chance, let's just say that at random, have not made any progress, then maybe it's time to start looking for someone else.
That's great advice. And I agree with it completely. How did you find different types of music? Were you more comfortable in the bel canto repertoire? Were you more comfortable in Mozart, the Verismo? Tell me where you feel the most comfortable, or at home fit you the best.
In general, after this many years of studying, it's not really hard to articulate, so I'll do it as best I'm able. When you're singing opera, basically portraying a character that's written into the opera by the librettist, you're not playing yourself. You have to become the character that you're singing. But when you're singing lieder, it's you, how you feel inside, not how a character feels, but you're singing how you feel about something. And that's what I think should be put into things. I find it easier to sing opera than doing it, because it's easier sometimes to lend yourself to another character and let your interpretation, and you know how you've been coached to do that, and have you worked with the conductor, how they want things done to do that. And I guess you're less vulnerable than letting your own self out in a lieder or something.
What music do you like to sing the best? Let's put it that way. Let's phrase it that way.
So in that way, I suppose bel canto, really depending. Sometimes I like something more dramatic too. And like I stated, I do like Buffa doing funny things too. But now, after this time, I find that kind of easy to do. And it's, I used to think it was sort of self-deprecating, but sometimes self-deprecating is actually quite funny.
What have you sung in the past that has a great connection to your singing, to you personally?
The Mahler piece, something like Ich bin der Welt. I think that the older I get, the more the more I do anyway, start to recognize your own mortality, which you don't think about when you're a kid. It's the last thing on your mind when you're younger.
Who, throughout your career, who, from a musical standpoint, musical guidance, who were your favorite people to work with? If you had a go-to person, who was that person musically to work with?
As a coach,
yes.
I've had some wonderful coaches over the years. I had Gary at
Gary Magby, yes.
Gary Magby at PCPA. I've worked with Richard Raub a number of times, and you can always learn something. If I've left anyone's name out, I don't mean to offend. It's just not popping into my
No, that's fine. Nobody's going to get offended. There's only 50 million people listening to this. Don't worry about it.
There you go. An example. When we did the Bill Yates tribute concert, and that was, for those that don't know, that was John's very first voice teacher in high school.
That's right.
And the one charge that he gave to John always to follow was to pay it back, to pay it forward. And John, I'll tell you right off the bat, you have done that times over.
Oh, thank you, Sandy. Thank you.
For me, for others, times and times over, because of what you actually mean to me, and that you wanted to give thanks to this gentleman. And then the hotel part was in the back, clean. It was absolutely perfect. You went in and you got your shower. Then I went in and got a shower, and my wife had packed me some body wash to take with me instead of a bar of soap. So I'm in the shower, and it didn't have any of the non-slip treads on the floor in the shower. So I'm soaping up with this body wash, but I was getting like dribbles on the floor. So I was all soaked up, and all of a sudden I started skating down the tub like this, and I lost my balance, and I grabbed, this is God, for the shower curtain. And in that split second of time, I said to myself as I was falling, I said, what the hell am I doing? This isn't going to hold me up. What am I doing? So I went plop. I fell out of the tub onto the floor out there, and I was covered in lather and soap. Thing of it was, I fell out, but it was kind of a high tub, so my ankles were still hooked in the tub. Slippery. I was trying to move, but I couldn't move. And it was the next thing I heard was that you heard me fall. You said, "Do you need help?" And I actually, I couldn't get up. I did need help, but I knew that if I said that I needed help, that you would have come in with the video on your cell phone running, and I would have seen my naked, soaped up rear end all over the internet the following day. But I knew in that moment, I said, no, he can't come. I know what's going to happen. I'll never live this down. They'll block out my face, so nobody sees it, and I'll see, and I'll see my white soaked up ass all over the internet, every channel I go on to, and I knew it. Now go ahead and deny it.
You know, we have been through a few laughs. We really did over the years. We really had some great times. Really, all good singers. And the people that we surround ourselves with, especially in Masterclass. You know, there's two things that they know about me that I don't lie about: singing or gambling. I have to say, and I've said this for years, and you know it, that you possess probably one of the most naturally beautiful baritone sounds that I've ever came across. A pleasure to listen to you sing. I've had the pleasure of working with you vocally. I've had the absolute honor of having you as a friend. I was probably closer to you than I was my brother. Find it an honor that you took part in Masterclass, and we are truly honored to have you as part of the Masterclass family, but more so that I'm honored to call you a friend. The years go by so fast. You take a look back and you say to yourself, you know, we were just doing this and we were in our 20s. It's not by coincidence that our paths cross. It's always for a reason. Elated that our paths cross, because we have so many stories, and you know, we can laugh, we can cry, and most of all, we can make great music, and it comes from the soul. Taking the time to pass our legacies down or paying it forward to the up and coming singers. I greatly appreciate it, Sandy. Thank you so much.
John, thank you. And the only thing I can respond to in saying that is, you are the brother that I never had.